Numb hands are a problem that I deal with in the studio very regularly, and in this video I'm going to give you 6 things that you can do or you can look at on your bike, check them off really, and see if basically you can solve this problem yourself at home. Hood position is one of the things on the bike that I see all the time that causes people to hold their hands on the handlebar the wrong way and cause pain. I've set this handlebar up to how I quite like it to be set up. So jumping on the bike just to get started, I'm gonna get 2 fingers, I'm gonna wrap them underneath the hood position. So this is my ring and pinky finger going underneath, and I'm pulling the long part of my hand onto the top part of this handlebar here. All I'm going to do from this point is 1, 2, 3. These fingers are nice and loose and relaxed, and I'm just gripping with this ring and pinky, and I can just drop my body into my shoulders and relax my whole grip from this position here. If the hood position's not set up well, this is going to be really hard to accomplish. Let's have a look and see what that looks like. Generally, what I tend to see in the studio an awful lot is people that have the base bar, if you like, or the drop set up in a way that makes it hard to get the hood set up. So generally what I'll see is people having the drops kicked up like this. So the first telltale sign that something's off is this drop part of the bar. If you like this thing here, this end of the handlebar normally wants to be vertical. This part of the handlebar here wants to be level with the floor. Now the problem that this creates is, generally when you have your hood set up, most people want to have them set up level. So setting these hoods up level. If I have this bar set up as I've described, and I pull these hoods up level, you can see there's a slight high spot in the handlebar just here before it then goes down again onto the hood. So same as last time, literally just do this exact same thing. So I'm gonna put my 2 fingers underneath the hood, gonna grab 1, 2, 3 nice and relaxed and sit forward. This hood all of a sudden is a little bit further away, and this high point is where I'm putting this part of my hand. As I load down and reach for the end of the hood, you can see that it basically pulls my wrist forward into this awkward position. So straight away, that overloads this part of my hand and it strains this top part of my wrist. That's gonna be a little bit uncomfortable. So you're gonna just pull your hands back like that, back like this, and pulling your hands back like this into the corner of the handlebar is one of the problems that's going to start to put too much pressure into this palm part of your hand on this corner here, and that's going to be one of your main problems that's going to cause numb hands. Now from here, it's really easy to sort the problem out. You just want to unwrap the bar tape from your handlebars, loosen off your stem bolts, put the handlebars level with the floor, come in, tighten them up. Then generally you want to grab a 5mm Allen key. Here's one I made earlier. You're gonna pull this hood back. Generally this 5mm slot on Shimano or SRAM, you're gonna loosen it off here, and effectively with it loose, what you're wanting to try and do, put your ring and pinky underneath again, and you're setting this hood position up. You're sitting on the hood, and you can see now that my wrist is a lot more square straight away, and I've got this constant little bit of pressure that's rolling from the back of my hand forwards, if you like, down into my fingers, and that's the same amount of weight distributed over a much larger surface area. So of course there's less pressure in one area, much lower chance of numbness, and it's just more comfortable, more ergonomic on the wrist, gonna be better on the elbow, shoulder, happy days all round. And you can see with the before and after, if I point my finger on the bar on the before, you can see that the drop part of the bar is almost like pointing down the way when it gets to the end of the bar. And generally that's associated with this kind of almost this high point here, which your hand gets pressed into, and that just adds kind of discomfort and takes numbness, if you like, into the palm of your hand. Before we move on to the second point, it's very important to highlight that most of these problems that I see generally come in combination, which always almost compound and make any particular problem with your hands much worse. So watch this video right through to the end to make sure you can just double check every single last problem and make sure you don't have it on your bike. You can fix 2 or 3 problems here, but have one big problem at the back of the bike with your saddle position, causing you to sit in a certain way, and then you're still gonna get numb hands, even though this is perfect. So just worth mentioning that before we get on with the rest of the video. The second thing that I see that contributes to numb hands quite a lot is a saddle that isn't supportive to your pelvis as it should be, leading to compensatory patterns across the rest of the bike. Basically, one of the things that I really want to try and avoid on a saddle is to have a really flexy shell. So to demonstrate that, imagine me pushing down in the middle. Now, most of the people I work with maybe sit around about 70 to 90 kilograms, and I'm just gonna push down on this saddle in the middle with maybe just a few kilograms of force. And you can see just how much of a flex the actual shell itself takes. The problem with excessive flex, like I would argue this saddle is approaching to have, is that when you press down, it creates this negative slope here. That's the first part of the problem. The second part of the problem is when I press down, it makes the nose really exposed. So the bit of the saddle that's meant to be supporting your pelvis the most here is sagging away, leaving the back of the saddle pushing you forward and the nose of the saddle pressing up into soft tissue. And that creates a compensatory pattern that almost everyone who sits on the saddle starts to fall into. And that's this rolling back on your pelvis posture that then is the first part of the problem with numb hands. When you sit on a saddle, ideally you want your pelvis to rotate forwards for a couple of reasons. Firstly, you want the hamstring, which is the muscle in the back of the leg, to be tensioned on the push down. If you roll back, there's less tension in this muscle. If you roll forward, there's tension when you start to push down on the pedal. The second thing with the pelvis is that when you roll back on these flexi saddles, one of the main compensations, as I've said, is you start to roll back. And you can see that the spine then starts to point up towards the ceiling. This is a problem because as I jump onto this bike, I'm just gonna put my pelvis into that rolled back posture I was talking about. And then you can see, so I'm clipped in. Now, as I lean forward, I can feel that the underside of my pelvis is sitting on the waist of that saddle, flexing. We don't want that flex, as I've said already. So what you do when you sit down on that saddle, I don't want to lean forward and like nail my soft tissue on the nose of that seat. So I'll just roll my pelvis backwards, tuck my bum cheeks forward. So I feel now I'm sitting on the most supportive part of the back of the saddle. The problem is my lower spine is now pointing up to the ceiling, like I demonstrated on Mr. Pelvis over there. So then when I reach forwards towards the bars, I'm rolling my pelvis back to spare the nose of the saddle nailing my soft tissue. And then I'm straight arm, hunched back posture that I see all the time in here. And then for me now, my elbows are locked out and my hands feel really far away from me. And I'm almost using my hands to push the bars to keep the nose of the saddle from nailing into soft tissue. You can see by comparison, this Pro Stealth along its waist is much more supportive. So yes, it does flex, and it's important that saddles do flex because you want them to move with you so that they don't feel like you're sitting on a spade on your ass. You want to feel like something's moving with you. But as I press down on this along the waist, there's no excessive flex, so I'm not going to feel like I'm constantly sliding forward, and I'm not going to feel like I'm getting nailed by the nose of the seat when I load the waist. Now when I'm sitting on this supportive saddle, you can see that I can lean my pelvis forward and round. So now I'm sitting on the bony tissue either side the top of my leg, and I can relax from my lower back in to the saddle. And this allows me to use my torso, I can engage my core, and I feel because my pelvis is rolled forward, my spine is pointing forward. So by the time I get up to my shoulders aren't up here with my hands really arm outstretched. I am able to just like relax forward from my lower back, keep my arms bent. So you can see how the saddle being supportive back here allows me to lower my shoulders and relax my arms and reach forward up here. It's important to see and appreciate that that comes from having a supportive saddle position primarily. I know that a lot of you are sitting down on your sofa watching me on your TV right now, and it's hard to leave a comment while you're watching on a TV. I would kindly ask you to pick your phone out of your pocket and leave me a comment. I want to know what questions you have specifically about how your numb hands could get solved while you're riding your bike. That's the third thing you can do to solve numb hands on your bike. You can see that when the bar is really wide, it basically encourages me to sit on the bike with this kind of rolled in wrist posture that builds pressure into my hand here and really flexes my wrist into an awkward position. So then by dropping the bar just into this width that I quite like, for me it's 38C to C with the hoods in this position here. I can just put my hands flat on the bar and I've got this elbow wrist straight line here, and that then allows me to hold more onto the heel of my hands with a completely neutral wrist position, and I feel that I'm a lot more supported by the bar. I can lean in forwards and I don't have to put my wrists in an awkward angle, which keeps the blood flow nice and smooth into my hands. A lot of you watching who have a bike similar to like a Canyon A-Road or Specialized Tarmac, of which there are probably a few of you with those bikes, the reach on those frames is particularly long, and in combination with the stem and the front end leads to positions that rely on excessive rotation of your pelvis forward. When I say like excessive, generally a lot of you who ride these bikes don't have the flexibility that goes hand in hand with being able to maintain your position on them. So excessive reach is one of these things that you really need to pay close attention to, because what starts to happen after you rotate further than you should is that the nose of the saddle starts to particularly drive into soft tissue. So you're all the way extended, your torso angle starts to drop in association with having to reach. And then all of a sudden, your pelvis rolls forwards that little bit too much and the saddle starts to dig in. You don't like the saddle digging in, so then at arm's reach, you then push the hands as hard as you can to stop rolling your soft tissue into the nose of the saddle. So you end up riding with arms locked, feeling like you're reaching forward. So this excessive reach problem is definitely killing a lot of your hands in terms of the numbness that you're experiencing. And there's really not an awful lot you can do with excessive reach other than reduce the reach. And the way that you want to do that is reducing the length of stem. It would generally be one of the primary ones. If your stem's already quite short, or you want to see or experiment with reducing the reach, you can bang the saddle forward and reduce the reach that way. The problem with putting the saddle forward, the further and further you put your saddle forward past where it should go, you start to put your center of gravity forward with your saddle, if that makes sense, along with it. Now, if I put my saddle into a too far forward position, but keep the reach the same, you can see that I will be slightly less extended. So yes, overall, I'm a little bit more comfortable, but now my hips aren't set back of the bottom bracket in the same way. So I'm gonna be in my quads far too much, and I'm probably gonna run out of usable rail space on the saddle as well. So generally when I recommend people reducing the reach, the easiest thing you can do is just buy a 10 or a 20 mil shorter stem, put that on your bike and go a couple of different rides and just experiment with it that way. The problem is, for a lot of you with integrated bar stems, you're probably going to have to effectively buy a 400, 500, 600 pound integrated bar stem in order to solve that problem. But this is like maybe a little bit of a tip. So if you're struggling to work out if it's the saddle that is too far back that's causing the problem, or the reach that is too long that is causing the problem, generally what you can do, if I put this saddle too far back and bring the bars back an equivalent amount, I'll be just as extended, but when I start to pedal backwards, because the saddle setback puts my hip angle into quite a slack position, all I mean by that is my hips quite far back of the bottom bracket, I'm leaning forward the same amount, but because my bum's so far behind my legs, it creates this tightness over the top of the pedal stroke. So in this case, if there was space in the saddle rail, I could just go, well, I'll put the saddle forward 1.5 centimeters. The reach is reduced like that. Also, coincidentally, I'm a lot smoother over the top of the pedal stroke, so it kind of solves the problem. And then I might still ultimately need to reduce my stem length a little. But for instance, if I now go into the same problem in terms of extension, but I put the saddle too far forward, you can see that I look and feel too extended in this position, but when I pedal backwards, I'm a lot smoother. So it's a much lower likelihood that it's the saddle setback that's causing my reach problem than it is just the stem being too long. Now, other things you can try would be to start sticking things in between the kick of the hood and where your hand ends here. So you could put in some foam or do a turbo session with your hands maybe 10 mil, 20 mil further back, and seeing if then that allows you to relax. And then you can sort of experiment and make a more educated guess that way. Obviously in the Bike Fit studio, if you were to come in, we've got adjustable stems, so you can then start playing around with the length of stem on a turbo trainer setup or an adjustable bike. You can start to play around with the extension and see what length stem that you would actually need. But for those of you who don't use this or don't have access to one or a fitter locally, then the best thing you can do is use that feedback loop, pedal backwards and see if the reach is coming from the saddle too far back or if the reach is coming from the stem being too long. Worth a try. Saddle height is generally another factor that contributes to numb hands. Typically, it can be just really broken down quite simply. If the saddle's too high, the saddle's going to be pressing into the underside of your pelvis. It's going to be destabilizing you through the bottom of the pedal stroke and also making you uncomfortable on soft tissue. So effectively, the only other place that you have to load would be the hands. So as you lean forwards with the saddle too high, it starts to dig in. So then effectively you just start to push your hands, bring them back to the corner of the bar, and you end up in this situation again where you bring your hands into this non-ergonomically optimized section of the handlebar that's got a small surface area with almost this kind of tight corner on it. You start to push back. You're sparing yourself on the saddle, yes, but you're pressing your hands into the handlebar. Other kind of contributing factor of excessive saddle height is this instability in the saddle that is effectively then almost making this problem worse, because when you pedal with a saddle too high, generally you'll feel like you're slipping forward. So you're pressing into the handlebars to stop feeling like you're falling forward. That's putting weight into the hands. You're pressing into them doubly hard again because you've got discomfort on the nose. So this extra high saddle height is generally another thing that you're going to have to want to watch for. Now, how do you know if your saddle's too high? One easy thing you can do in this position, close your eyes, tune into your feet, relax your heels, start to pedal backwards. As you pedal backwards with the saddle too high, you can see visibly that my feet have no control through the bottom of the pedal stroke. A couple of things, there's no point in the saddle being that high anyway because I don't have control, so I might as well put it down. And that jerkiness literally causes that instability that we're talking about. So we're going to be hitting a double win by lowering the saddle down. In this case, I'm going to put it down 1 centimeter and try that feedback loop again. Why are you closing your eyes? I'm closing my eyes to tune in and pay attention to the sensations that I'm feeling in my feet. Why are you pedaling backwards? Because it unweights the pedal stroke and it makes you really tune into what you're doing. So I'm here again, relaxing my heels, I'm pedaling backwards, and you can see there's a little bit of instability. My hands feel lighter, less pressure. I'm gonna put it down again, leaning forwards, relaxing. I feel like I'm a lot more relaxed already just by dropping it that extra 5 mil. And then I'm pedaling backwards. And I feel like I've got that control through the bottom of the pedal stroke. There's still a little bit of dead spot there, but I actually can, if I tune in and really focus, control the pedal stroke in full. Excessive saddle height, major contributor to pain and discomfort on your hands.